Good morning. Good evening. Another beautiful day here in New Zealand. My name is AJ, this is the Mighty Glue Stick, and this is my live stream. As is our tradition, I will first cut some cheese. This is another fine example of the death cheese, which I'm slightly famed for eating. It's a hearty and delicious breakfast. And I do this as a preamble to allow everyone time to get in here. Hey everybody, nice to see you. There's also summer over here in New Zealand, so it is beer time. And I'll be drinking the finest West Coast Monteith's black beer. Cheers. Shannon, nice to see you. Moon Dog, not an in real life friend. Zachary, Douglas, Sage, Thesiama. Was that it's a Theslimer. I'll just pop out the chat. So today, subject is pretty clear, which is Dark Alliance has just been announced. He gave up drinking entirely. Not water, not coffee. Yo! Sup, Gavin? Hey, Thomas. Stephen. So Dark Alliance, you're on an alcohol diet, nice. So I was hired to be it was kind of mysterious how this all happened. And it was kind of like early on last year when I was really just sort of getting into the Discord thing. When I got a message over the Discord saying that, somebody knew somebody who knew somebody, and all of a sudden I got sent a non-disclosure agreement from Wizards of the Coast, of all places. And that was fine. And then I didn't hear anything from them. And then I got approached by this guy, Jeff Hatton, who said, would you like to help us out with D&D lore? And I was like, oh yeah. And as is our way, we had a Skype interview, which turned into a question, which basically morphed from a question and answer session into negotiating sort of terms of a hiring agreement. And I could tell that these guys were okay because they had miniatures and stuff scattered in the background. Jeff was at the office, and he had dragon miniature, I think. It was the large white dragon, which I've got over in the corner there, which is on the shelf behind him. And I was just like, yeah, you're all right. So he passed my test. Hail, Yubtub. And that was the beginning of our thing. So then, since I work in New Zealand and they were over in Canada, everything was basically done at weird different timescales, different time zones. And so their company was using the software called Slack, which was basically a message board system where you can post things and stuff like that, and everybody had their own projects and things that they were working on. And I basically just went on there and got asked questions by people who are working on the project. So they would say, hey, what do you think of this? Does this look okay? What's this? And one of the most important questions that I got asked about was, well, one of the things that I threw out there was the tiers of Saloon, for instance. If you're standing in the world of Faerun, for instance, and you look up at the night sky and the moon doesn't have the tiers of Saloon behind it, then it just doesn't look right. So that was relevant to the project, and was really good. Just pop it in to say hi. Hi, Lord. From Iceland. Wow, nice to see you. Zachary? Yeah, so that's how it started. And so I would log in every day, and while I was working on YouTube videos, and get asked questions by these guys. And then essentially they just pay me at the end of every month for the consulting work. And as that went on, because this was months, I think it was about 3 or 4 months in, and I was answering questions on Goblin language and giant history and orc history and basically everything to do with the history of the Icewind Dale area, and a certain set of books by a certain author, which were integral to the story of the game and the entire region. When you think about it, like, you don't really do much in Icewind Dale without running across R.A. Salvatore's work, and Bob's work is the fundamental foundation of the story and how it evolved. But also, as was stressed to me, they were like, okay, we know this stuff. You're telling us stuff which, and you're really good at finding this information, but we want you to go beyond that, and introduce new elements and new things. And I was like, oh, okay, adding things to the Forgotten Realms. And so I got to, as that sort of evolved, and I started writing some actual lore and stuff and expanding on the existing lore, using a very logical and methodic sort of fashion, and piecing together the timeline with the grand history of the realms, and going through the various world guides of Forgotten Realms. Then I started to extrapolate the origin stories and legends and some of these things, and of particular interest was the war between the dragons and the giants that took place around the spine of the world, and that time was a very long time ago, but it was relevant. And also the fall of the Netheril Empire was relevant. So this is about the time on my channel where I put together and released that video on the Uthkart barbarian tribes. I was actually putting that together as a brief introduction for the people at Took Games on who the Uthkart barbarians were and where they came from, and the importance of the Netheril Empire and things like that was part of it as well. So I was kind of blending what I was doing on YouTube with the work that I was doing for Took Games as a consultant on the D&D stuff. But more and more I was taking on these writing projects that they were giving me. So they wanted to basically offer me a position there, sort of morph into more of a consultant to actually being a writer for the lore and the background of the game. And the idea is that when you're playing the game, although it's an action-based adventure game where you've got a squad of you've got a character that's you're looking at third person and they're running through the world. You've got the beautiful backdrop of the Spine of the World Mountains and all that sort of stuff going on. And you can also play co-op, so other members of the party making up Drist and Bruenor and Canterbury and Wolfgar, going through the world. There's also deeper elements to the world as well. So there's tablets of lore that you can find, and there's signposts and background information that you can click and learn about the Forgotten Realms as well. And that's where I came in, and where I was talking about really in-depth information about the Spine of the World Mountains and Icewind Dale and exactly what goes on there in the 10 towns and Knucklehead Trout and all that sort of stuff, and the conflicts and the Uthgard barbarians. And yeah, so I can't really talk about much about the story, obviously, because I don't want to give anybody spoilers, but it's very much firmly set in events that we those of us who have read the novels by R.A. Salvatore know very well and know and love. So they're integral to that. Yeah. Am I going to be the next R.A. Salvatore? Well, I'd have to start writing if that was the case. he should be part of the Forgotten Realms pantheon. I agree. Yeah, so Sage, the new lore that I wrote is really juicy. And so one of the aspects of the lore that I wrote, which I don't think is too much of a reveal, is the actual origins of Kelvin's Cairn and what is underneath Kelvin's Cairn. What is Kelvin's Cairn? Like, we know it's a big mountain, but the description of it is it's not really a mountain. It's actually a historic monument of sorts. It's the highest peak in that area, because we're right on the verge of the Arctic Circle, and beyond the Arctic Circle of Icewind Dale is Orc territory. That is the Orc nation of the Spine of the World. And so that's why so many orcs come down from there, because they're essentially pouring out of the Arctic Circle of Tyrol. So the Spine of the World makes a barrier, you could say, which makes the rest of the continent sort of right up against the edge of that, with holding off the prevailing winds and stuff. And the prevailing winds sort of pour over Icewind Dale out into the Sea of Broken Ice and along the Sword Coast. So yeah, and that's of course the ancient kingdom of Astoria. So there's lots of giant remains, remnants, and ruins and things like that buried under stuff as well. And of course you've got the industrious activities of the dwarves in that region, who sort of form a subculture, who are alongside the 10 towns. And the 10 towns is made up of a diverse group of people from across the Sword Coast region. So you've got like the Uthgar barbarians, for instance, are made up of not only the Northmen who came from the islands above the Moonshae Isles over onto the coast, and Uthgar was one of the barbarian raiders, so he was a mortal, and the Uthgar barbarians that stayed behind were blended with the refugees from fallen Netheril. So the Uthgar barbarians is actually made up of these two different racial groups. But before them, already existing on the islands were, along the Sword Coast anyway, up around Icewind Dale, was a primitive sort of Inuit people who lived along there and fished the Sea of Broken Ice. And also the Regiad barbarians, who were there for a very long time before the Uthgar barbarians even got there. So that's something that a lot of people don't know, is that there's actually different distinct cultural groups of barbarians that live there. And one of them, which is where Wolfgar's people come from, is much, much older and well established than the Uthgar barbarians. The Uthgar barbarians are basically just a ragtag group of wilderness people who are new to the scene over the last 1,000 years or so. Yeah, so I get asked. Obviously, I'm getting asked a lot of questions about gameplay and stuff like that. I don't know. I've only seen a little bit, like a promo sort of video right when the game was in development. So I don't even know really if it's still exactly like what I saw. What I saw was a third-person perspective, action-based, combat-intensive video game, essentially. So, yeah, it looked fine. I was mainly interested in the background information, what we could see in the scene, what the monuments were, how things looked in relation to what the actual world should look like. So that was my area of focus. So I wasn't interested in gameplay whatsoever. I was not there to design the combat stuff and the video gamey aspect of it. I was more interested in what it looked like and the feel of it, and I wanted to make sure that the game was true to what you would expect to see if you're in the Forgotten Realms in the Icewind Dale region. And when you're looking at it, it's like, yep, that's exactly where you are. So I was very happy with that. That included the design aspects of, like, for instance, there's, with designing a video game, the animation of creatures and things like that has a budget. There's budgetary concerns and time constraints and things like that. So Took at the time wasn't picked up by Wizards of the Coast. It was an independent company, and they're pouring a lot of time and effort and money into this. I said, like, okay, if you're going to be on Kelvin's Cairn, for instance, there's crag cats. Crag cats are are a concern, and they said, "Oh, we can't afford to animate crag cats." I was like, "Okay, well, you could hint that crag cats are around." It's like, "Oh, Guinevere's found something. What is it?" It's the remains of a crag cat. Oh, no, it's the remains of a tundra yeti. It's like, "Oh, really? What's the hunting the tundra yetis?" Well, there's probably crag cats around, but it may be hinted at in the game. I don't know if they're actually going to include that idea or not. But I thought that was a good way of handling it. It's like, yeah, there's possibly crag cats, but they're very secretive until they attack you. And other things like in the modern games of D&D, you don't see Verbeeg very often. Verbeeg seem to have fallen by the wayside, but they're very important in that area of the world. And in the stories written by R.S. Salvatore, you hear about Verbeeg a lot. So Big Grin is one of the Verbeeg giants that Wulfgar and Driz fight in the very early days of their relationship when Driz had basically just ended. Well, he was still training Wulfgar in a way. And in his like Drizzt has got that he's very sort of calm and measured and stuff, but when it comes to fighting, he's a little bit addicted to it. And Wulfgar realizes in the early days that Drizzt is probably going to get him killed one day because he's just like a little bit on the edge. And that was the fight where Wulfgar thought, "You're going to get me killed, but okay." And that was them taking on a big bunch of Verbeeg giants. But in the game, of course, since the modern audience isn't really very familiar with Verbeeg, they made them frost giants, which is perfectly fine. So Big Grin is still around, and he's a frost giant in this one. And there's other big name monsters and stuff that are very important to the life and times of these characters that you get to fight in person in the game. So there's dungeons and there's dragons and there's all sorts of other stuff. And so they would ask me about, design elements of this and that. More sort of modern stuff like what sort of little helpful creatures and things could there be around. And I took the cue from, for instance, the island of Chult has got chewingas and things like that. It's like, well, surely Chult isn't the only place with chewingas. There must be other areas and other types of chewingas around. So that sort of idea. And consulting on what does giant language look like? What was giant graffiti or giant language written onto massive stones and stuff look like? What do the monuments and holy relics and sites of the Uthgard barbarians and the Rediad barbarians look like? What do the clan symbols and things of the different barbarian tribes look like? What are their rituals? What are the religious holidays and significant things like that? What do the buildings and architecture of ancient Netheril look like? So all that sort of stuff was what we were factoring into it. So we wanted to make sure that you get a legitimate Forgotten Realms experience. So yeah, regardless of what the gameplay is, I'm pretty confident that the guys who were making this have they're very committed to Forgotten Realms looking properly like Forgotten Realms. So yeah, I'm quite confident in that. As for the flack that the game trailer is getting, it's not really. It's like a cinematic thingy. One thing I do like about it is Drizzt actually looks like a drow, and drow don't look that attractive by our standards. Like elves have got weirdly distorted faces by modern human standards. And I know in the books he's described as looking attractive, but that's a much broader aspect than. Like from the perspective of people in the Forgotten Realms, he probably looks attractive for a drow or an elf, but he's still got slanted up cat-like features to his head. So I'm quite happy about how he looks in the game. Wulfgar as well. He looks more like He looks more like Bjorn Ironsides or Ragnar Lothbrok from Vikings, which I think is quite kind of cool, and they really do. The barbarians really do look like Vikings because that's exactly what they're supposed to culturally look like along the Sword Coast there. They come from the Northmen who came from the sea. Yeah, so that's exactly what they should look like. Catti-brie, she looks like a warrior woman, which I'm quite happy with as well. And Bruno, he differs quite a bit from like a lot of the cover art that you see in on the books. For instance, the weapon designs and things like that look quite different as well. But they also have stronger connections to the more like the weapon designs and things that they developed for dwarves for 4th edition, which have carried through as more sort of angular geometric designs and things, whereas you see the cover artwork for Brunor's many notched axe is more sweepy and curved, which is more like a human style weapon, but it doesn't really actually make a lot of cultural sense if you look at the overall design aspects of Forgotten Realms. So I didn't have any input on that, on what the characters look like and things like that, but I'm quite happy with how they actually look. And they've got it all right, like, the one of the horns missing from Brunor's helmet, for instance. That's an important lore aspect that everybody seems to have glossed over. Or the combat style of Drist in that thing. I know it's kind of weird with the GoPro style camera and stuff, but you see him doing the sweeping overhand attacks with his rapiers. That is very much a part of the book and the lore of like what his combat style is. It's a specific type of combat style. And the speed of how fast he was stabbing a goblin in the chest was kind of important. But, everybody was like, meh. Gamers, man. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not Knights of the Old Republic D&D style. It's not Dragon Age or anything like that. It is an action game for people who want to kill stuff. And I'm fine with that. There are opportunities for the lore and things like that. There are opportunities for you to explore the game. There's replayability. The idea is that they wanted a deep play, which means that you can run through the adventure, kill a lot of stuff, run from encounter to encounter and do all that sort of stuff and skip over all the dialogue and talking with people and things. Or you can go through it again and there's a lot of stuff to unlock and learn about the Forgotten Realms. My job was to provide that depth of stuff that people can learn, including the deep history of the Forgotten Realms. And the person who actually provides that lore is quite an interesting character as well. Hello from Virginia. Hey, thanks, Outer Limits. What's the gameplay like? Again, I don't know. I've only seen like test footage and alpha footage and stuff like that and examples of artwork and stuff. The gameplay and stuff is actually things that they work on later on, and at first they need to work out what they're actually going to be animating and designing before they actually get around to it. So the gameplay, as far as I can tell from the promo stuff that I saw, unfortunately I can't share it with you, was a third person perspective looking at the characters going around and doing stuff. So it's not like Warhammer Vermintide. Somebody asked me if it's like that first person perspective. It's not like that. It's more of a third person perspective looking at the group of characters going through the environment. So you are like over the shoulder looking at them doing their stuff. And it's hack and slash. So it's learning combat styles which are assigned to buttons and things like that, and you do combat moves. And your combat moves and powers with your weapons and stuff are specific to each individual character, obviously, like unlocking shield techniques and axe techniques with Brunor, and Calibri's obviously got Talmaril, Heart's Seeker, her bow. Wolfgar has obviously got Aegis Fang and the special powers of Aegis Fang, which he can unlock as the story goes on. Like in the trailer that you see, he doesn't actually throw Aegis Fang. He goes whoomph like that, and an energy ghost replica, which is actually a spirit weapon of Aegis Fang, goes woof, 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 and wipes out a whole bunch of people. So that was cool. We're chatting about Dark Alliance, the D&D video game coming up, which I was working as a consultant on. Thanks, Robert. Why did Drist's eyes change colour from red to violet when he left the Underdark? Also, kobolds aren't racist, they're speciesists. His eyes, well, the violet is within the colour range of drow eyes. So his eyes have always been violet. They, in older editions of D&D, their eyes appear red when they're emitting basically infrared. So infravision was infrared light. So underground, their eyes would glow with the infrared light. One of the interesting things about being a ranger in the Underdark is how much you rely on seeing heat patterns. Thanks, Daniel. Hello, Sweden. Yeah, Dracos here is born with violet eyes, not red. So his eyes would still appear red when he was underground. Well, the black and white infravision, so his eyes would appear bright. But to somebody like, for instance, Canterbury had a diadem which provided her with starlight vision, so she could see with enhanced normal sight. I think it was still black and white. I don't know if she could still see in colours, but essentially it gave her cat-like vision of the elves underground. So they're not using infravision in that particular case, on Canterbury's case. So she couldn't see things in the way that the dwarves and the elves do down there, which is heat vision. So it would be impossible to hide against like a warm vent and something just by blending yourself into the background wall. She'd be able to see you. Dragon supremacy. Yeah, that was probably what you were reading, Robert. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, the relationship between Drist and Menzo Brownzan and Zach Nafane and all that sort of stuff is periphery to the story. It's important, obviously, to his character arc. Yes, Matt, thank you for the physics lesson on what light colours are. But this is a fantasy game. To represent visually that that some sort of weird vision effect is going on with characters underground in Dungeons and Dragons, the eyes were often depicted as red. That's not so much the case now. But yeah, physics. And here's a question for you. What colour is a fireball? Is it red or blue or white? Tinkers are artificers, but not all artificers are tinkerers. It is pedantic. It's fine though. What would be ridiculous is getting into a heated argument about infrared vision as opposed to a fantasy game. Sure, his Underdark storyline would be a great fantasy story. Like, for instance, he goes off into the Underdark by himself, and then Canterbury follows along afterwards, and they both basically have independent adventures, and then they meet up in the Menzo Branson later on. And of course, there's the cinematic of dropping a massive stalactite on top of the Temple of Lolth, for instance. Demons being summoned, all sorts of stuff would be really cool. You certainly are going to see a lot of heavy fantasy elements in this game, I can guarantee you. The colour I'm looking for is 42. Yeah, exactly. At 3rd level it's red, at 9th level it's white. Good answer. I'll accept that. Well, I'm pretty sure the Drow of Menzo Branson would all be of the Eleutheri bloodline, but how can you tell? I mean, there's been so much movement and travel, and so much of their history, and once they went underground, is unknown. So you have no idea. But very good lore there, William. You are definitely an elven sage, that's for sure. Like, I imagine if I bumped into you in the libraries of Candlekeep, you'd have like books of elf stuff. You'd have like elf memento ears and stuff. You'd be like, I think your obsession with elven culture is getting a little too far. It's like, I don't eat meat. Not saying that elves are vegetarian. I'm just saying if you like took it too far. Yeah, exactly. Its colour is pain. Green flame. Nice one, Joseph. Yeah, Wolfgar's hammer is not catching on fire. If you slow down that clip very slowly and just do it frame by frame, you see that he's holding onto the hammer, but a spectral spirit weapon of the hammer goes flying out from him. So he's basically going woof like that and holding onto the hammer. So this is what I don't know about. Like I've seen the gameplay where he's slamming the crap out of things with the hammer, and how they're all working in concert together in the same combat area. But I haven't seen the specifics of what all the different combat styles and stuff were. That was still very much getting developed as the game was going on. So I've my consulting and working with Toot Games ended months and months ago. He hit an invisible oil pot. Tadpoles did nothing wrong. No, I haven't looked, Nicholas. He is an elven sage. Oh, it's a low fantasy. I think a fireball would be a rainbow of reds, blues, yellows, purple. Probably, yeah. Like it would start off super hot, like an almost invisible point as it's radiating extreme heat, and then it would drop through the spectrum until it gets red by the time it's exploded. Hmm. Can an artificer be a carpenter? Well, certainly I'd imagine a lot of different, like, because these guys are artificing, they're building stuff from scratch. You don't have pre-made parts, essentially, that you would order in for, you know, like gun components and things like that. You'd obviously be working on crossbows and things like that, different arrows and things, and working them yourself. So I'd say there'd be elements of jewelry making. What do you call metalsmith? Silversmithing, watchmaking, clockwork, fletching, carpentry, all sorts. Oh yeah, a fireball going off to somebody with infrared vision would be a blinding flash. How would I do xenomorphs in D&D? There's actually a type of creature which is like that. Essentially, I would just use them like super strong Kruthic, but there's actually a monster that exists which is pretty much exactly like the alien xenomorphs. They just get worse and worse and worse. Hey, James. Yes, that dragon in particular, you would be familiar with if you're familiar with the history of Drizzt in particular. There's two dragons that are very important to both Wolfgar and Drizzt in the Icewind Dale area. One of them features very heavily in the game. Well, one of them you definitely fight in the game. Yeah. Well, let's see. If you wanted to do a Xenomorph, you would have for the chest burster. Well, for the egg thing, that would basically I would use a mimic. For the chest burster, I'd use Rotgarubs. For the baby thingy, I'd use something like a Quasit. And for the mature Xenomorph, I would have a look at a mixture between Kruthic and Displacer Beast, maybe even an Umber Hulk or something like that. Just, mixing existing material to make up what you need. Use the stats to get all the balance right, and then basically just change the fluff. What's the difference between Effigy Masters and Artifices? They seem very similar, except Effigy Masters make constructs. What do Artifices and Adventures do? Well, Artifices also make constructs. So Effigy Masters and Artifices are combined in the modern take on it. So, for instance, if you go to the world of Kryn, most of the gnomes are tinker gnomes. So they're artificering is part of their culture. Artificering is a word. Battlesmith Artificers are better paladins. Changed my mind. Well, they're not reliant on belief. Can a gnoll contract lycanthropy? How would you know? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say no, thanks to their demon-bloodedness. Giants can, though, particularly hill giants. We have an example of that in the lore. I don't have any examples in the lore of gnolls contracting lycanthropy, but if it's appropriate for your game, go for it. Go for it, as always. Like the yeses and nos for me apply to game lore. So if you're asking me questions about can something or can something not, I'll be answering from the perspective of can I think of existing examples in the lore where that has happened. But that is always superseded by the rules of your table. So if you want it to happen, make it happen. Can I do an RA character build? What is an RA character build, Aaron? Do I have any monsters, go-to monsters for reskinning? Oh, yeah, all sorts. I don't know. I mean, there's 500 odd monsters in the monster manual that you can go through and use. So you're spoiled for choice, really. If you can't combine various aspects of monsters and the monster manual to make your monster, it's not that hard. There's tables and charts and things out there for challenge rating, for instance. So challenge rating relates to the proficiency bonus, the armor class, the hit points, the average hit points, the attack bonus, the saving throw, save DCs required to save against all the monster's effects, and the average amount of damage that it's going to be putting out each round, as well as like the maximum group damage that it can be putting out each round as well. That's really what challenge rating covers, and so that's a sliding scale that you can gauge against the challenge rating and what those stats look like for your creature. And so you can make up a monster in like 15 minutes by just running your finger across the chart and going, okay, I want that, and that, and that. And then you just basically, you can like lower or raise the hit points if you want, but not to an excessive degree. And that will give you an appropriate speed bump for your characters along the road to their, success. If it's a boss monster, then that speed bump can effectively become a wall. If they can't make it past that, then they'll need to divert and go down a different path, sort of thing. Depends on what you want in your story. A were-shark gnoll would be interesting. I like that idea. You need to clone me so I've got time to look at other games. Well, as my success grows, I may actually be able to get some assistance with some of the work that I do. Hey, thanks, Kale, Carl, I don't know. If you have a player start with a half fiend template and use wish to gain half demon, would they be considered an outsider or a native outsider? Well, they're certainly not a native outsider. So I'm going to go with outside. Wow, that's a trick question because you've given me two options that don't fit really well. Starting with a half fiend template, so are they? So they're a Cambion. I'm going to go with Cambions or outsiders. Or half devil. Well, yeah. I mean, you can still use Cambion. Or just a funky looking tiefling. Do you know if it will be a whole adventure game like original? Oh yeah, there's definitely a story going on. Like it is directly related to the novels of R.A. Salvatore. Directly. So if you've read the R.A. Salvatore novels with featuring Drist and Wolfcar, you'll know what happens in the story. It's like it's dealing with a specific timeline and it's a specific series of events. Ravnica, yeah, I'll get around to it. Yeah. Am I getting the product called Grim Hollow? I've seen Grim Hollow. Currently, I have two entire game settings to read through. One is the Midgard game setting, and the other one is Fate Forge. Yeah. So these are entirely new worlds to look through. This is the universe of Iana and in Fate Forge from Studio Argate. And the other one is from Kobold Press, which is the Midgard world setting, including Zobek and the old Margrave Forest. You should definitely check out the Crafting Muse. She's something of a Kobold Press representative and an expert on the old Margrave Forest at this point. Isn't there an arch villain in the Forgotten Realms that has the ability to transfer his... yeah, that's... what's his name? Why am I keep thinking Alhoon? Yes, there is a wizard who cloned himself lots, and he's got lots of clone versions of him. He's like the Baron Zemo of D&D. But yeah, he cloned himself a lot, and there's a lot of them running around. Hey, no name, thanks. You inspired me to run a game featuring a beholder who dreamt up a haunted cabin in front of his cave. The cabin is actually a half-fiendish greater mimic. Nice. Does there exist an official half-dragon race for 5th edition? Yeah, it's in the monster manual. Well, not the monster manual. It's in one of the monster guides. Foldos or Xanathars. Or Modern Canons. Manchun, thank you. I was close. Alhoon, Manchun. Now you know how my mind remembers things. Me. Do I think they will do Dark Sun? Well, 5th edition has been going on for quite some time now. We've gotten a few hints of things. Like, I'm actually a little bit surprised that they did Eberron before anything else. But that's okay. I mean, because when you think about it, Eberron's got a specific vibe, a feel for it. And I guess the lovers of that campaign setting have been crying out for new material for a while. And Eberron kind of carried through 3.5, I think. Like, it was the big ticket of the end of the 3.5 era. And in 4th edition, the world settings sort of petted out, really, because like Narath never really got very well developed as a setting, unfortunately. Mainly because I think the people who were working on it, like Chris Perkins, for instance, I would have loved to have seen Chris Perkins's main sort of campaign setting that he had going on, which is like a water world with lots of archipelago islands and stuff, and lots of ship-based combat things going on. I would have loved to have seen him bring that to the games in development, but Narath just felt a little bit like you were hearing about it third person, and it was just rehashed. It chopped out bits and pieces of other existing D&D lore, like the gods and stuff, for instance, and just wedged them in there. The Dawn War story, like the cosmology of 4th edition, was way more interesting than the world that that was sort of the main setting for that edition, unfortunately. So Narath never really fired up anybody, I don't think. But, you know, certainly Tieflings and Dragonborn were very central to it. Hey, thanks, Gadzooks. Do you think Wizards of the Coast is losing direction? Game aside, all their announced products look like promo material and knickknacks rather than content. Let's see. So we've had Acquisitions Incorporated and Rick and Morty's event. The thing that gets me is Rick and Morty's adventure, that supplement, is actually far more useful, I think, to somebody who's just starting out the game than Acquisitions Incorporated is for if you're a fan of the Acquisitions Incorporated game and the and basically Penny Arcade, then you would get that and you would run a game exactly like they run in their live streams and stuff and their stage shows and things. I'm a fan of that and things, but I personally think the product was not that great. The main thing that really soured me to that was the Dungeon Master screen was a piece of shit. It was the worst Dungeon Master screen I've ever seen. It was basically a joke. Like, if you're going to have a joke, fine, but don't make it at the customer's expense. Like, if I'd known that there wasn't actually going to be any really useful information on the Dungeon Master screen for Acquisitions Incorporated, I wouldn't have spent the money on the bloody thing. So yeah, it's a joke that was very sour for me. So it's in my collection of Dungeon Master screens for sure. The irony is I never get to actually use Dungeon Master screens. The most useful Dungeon Master screen I've ever gotten was the one that I got for the Arcane Note. There's a little mini foldable Dungeon Master screen that's only like this big, is sitting stuck to my wall, and I reference it when I'm playing online games. So yeah, there you go. But the Rick and Morty's guide is actually really good. It's really good. And I've heard that the Dungeon Master screen is packed with good information. So yeah, back to your question. Is that promo material? Yeah, absolutely. That's promo material for the people who have are primarily responsible for reaching new markets, and that is the Twitch streamers and live streamers and stuff who are running games for the audiences. What I'm very surprised about is that we've seen acknowledgement of Critical Role, and Tal'Darai has got its own setting book, which is 5th edition based, but we haven't actually seen Wizards of the Coast take it on officially. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's not like, and really when you think about it, the problem with involving celebrity in the promotion of your material in game is that celebrity and multimedia and the press and all that sort of stuff thrives on controversy and dragging up stuff, and the Me Too movement and anybody's like social improprieties and stuff get wrapped up in the commercial product that they're attached to. So the more celebrities, particularly fringe celebrities that are involved in Dungeons and Dragons, the more at risk they become of being smeared with the same brush of anything that those celebrities get involved in or are doing on the side. For example, Holly Conrad and Jared, that whole sorry drama that went on. Basically a love triangle between those guys that which sank their franchise, so to speak. So do I think we're going to be seeing the Trash Witch around anytime soon? No. What if they made that into an official D&D character and stuff? That would be kind of screwed as well. Yeah, it's official sponsored merch, which from a marketing perspective it makes sense. From a long-term fans of Dungeons and Dragons, it's like it's a little bit sour because we know it's just a flash in the pan thing, and we know it's definitely market driven. Like it's fad based content rather than fan based content. So fad based content is bringing people in. Fan based content is for long time consumption of the game. It builds on that legacy of lore and stuff. And the whole legacy of lore thing can occasionally butt heads with the people who are new and coming into the hobby and stuff, because nobody wants to feel like an idiot that doesn't know anything, so they obviously rail against this well-established lore of the game, which has been going on for 40 years. I mean, it's 40 years of information. So on the one hand, you'd have to be suicidally stupid to throw away all of that information. Like, for instance, that's the reason why I'm so upset about the Phoenix and the way they treated the Phoenix, is because they were throwing away their own IP. Just threw it out. But on the other hand, I understand that people have a problem with there's so much, like, I can't play in Forgotten Realms because it's too intimidating. There's just so much stuff going on. Or it's like, my characters don't mean anything because there's these big famous characters that do all the stuff in the world anyway. They're just there in the background. They're just doing stuff, It's like, so-and-so has gone missing, so your characters have got to go and rescue them. That's the whole idea. It's not like you're running through, the Shah and you run into, you're on your way to Lurin to rescue them from some tyrannical flotilla of ships that have come from Karatur and are invading the Forgotten Realms, for instance. So there could be a massive war going on in your world. It doesn't have to coincide with what's going on in the lore of the game and official products and stuff. Once the game hits your table, it becomes yours. So yeah, those characters are just there to sell books and stories and video games. They don't have to be a part of your game. That was the other thing that I got from people who are watching the trailer. They're watching this trailer for the video game, and it's really just like a little cinematic piece. And they're like, "Ah!" And they're railing against it so bad. It's like, "Oh, the animation is terrible, blah, blah." Sure, artistic preferences, valid and stuff. But saying that you're not going to even play the game because it's ruined the IP for you, it's like, come on. Come on. Icewind Dale wouldn't even be on the map if it wasn't for R.A. Salvador's books. So, yeah. Troll's got a troll. When we'll get your first Me Too accusation? Oh, I'm well past that, buddy. Well past. Matt Mercer talked about it a little bit. He wasn't interested in doing a new book. Sorry, I missed that. Yeah, they really like to stay in control of their own stuff. But on the other hand, they're using, Vecna and things like that. They're using, they're using copyrighted material of like Beholders and Vecna and things like that. That's all, Like I couldn't release a product with Xanathar and things like that in there because every time I mention Beholder, that's owned by Wizards of the Coast. Yeah, Elminster is a problematic character. What was up with the mad Max Ice Guy knocking on Wizard of the Coast fundraiser? I don't know. I don't know. So I haven't actually been paying a lot of attention to that stuff because I'm not a fad-based D&D guy. I'm a fan-based D&D guy. 3.5 is too number crunchy for me. Well, yeah. Like the feats that we have in 5th edition it's a nod to the feat system of the past, but really one of the things I love about the feats in 5th edition is their packages that give you what you need, what you're aiming for in your character straight away. You're giving up a fairly large hefty bonus, which is your attribute point bonus, and in an attribute based system, which is what 5th edition is, it's bounded accuracy and stuff, your attributes actually mean something. Like they form the basis, the foundation of your character in 5th edition far more than other editions. Or it's trimmed down to the point where where everything is based on your stats, and your stats really define your character. Like you look at a character now and the stats really mean something. So the feats, when you get them, are like, boom, you're an archer that can do special archer stuff now. In 3.5 edition, one of the things I really disliked about it was like, okay, I gain a feat. Well, it's one part of the archer thing that I want to do. So now I have to wait until I'm the next level before I can do unlock the next little bit, because that's a requirement that I have to take for the next one. It's like, what are we studying for a university degree? I understand it's character progression over the history and career of your character, but there is a disparity between the combat styles and techniques and things that you're learning slowly as your character progresses, and this, like, compare it to Wizards, for instance. It's like, oh, I know how to make a wall out of steel now. It's like, right, and your character is just learning how to fire into a crowd of people without hitting his friend in the face. There was a disparity there. And that's one of the things about 3.5 edition. It's great. It's got lots of customization and elements that you can combine into it. So does 5th edition, but 5th edition is streamlined. It's like you've got your background, you've got your character class, you've got your character race. And put them all together and you have, and not only that, but you've got your character class and the specializations that your character can go into. So it's like your prestige classes are built into your character. So you don't have to do all that calculus and number crunching and accounting and little bits and pieces and adjustments and scribbling out and ruining your character sheet as you go on. Although, who uses character sheets these days? Show of hands, everybody who actually uses a paper character sheet these days. I'm interested. So 3.5 edition is fine, but 5th edition is an evolution of that. 4th edition went off into a different tangent to combine where it was like, I know what they were intending, and 4th edition was fine. It was one of the easiest editions to pick up and play when you haven't played D&D before, because it played very much like other types of games that you're more used to. You could define your character's abilities like cards. You could literally print out cards that you would play during the round to keep track of exactly what your daily and encounter and utility powers were, and when you're using them and when you recovered them. Just like these days, people represents healing potions by a little potion that have got the pair of dice in there that represent the healing potion. That's fantastic. So the game has progressed and evolved. And each of those steps needed to happen. Like 4th edition needed to happen for us to get 5th edition. Use human skin as paper. Ew. Man, imagine if you tattooed a character sheet on your arm and you're just like... you got to use the Sharpie and like made your character. It's like, I love this character. I may never wash again. Ah, yeah. Elminster is mainly the reason I hate playing in Forgotten Realms. You know, in the entire times that I've been playing Forgotten Realms, the characters have only ever encountered Elminster once. And that was to rescue them from getting all of them being killed too early, because they were low level, against a white dragon that was stalking them across a particular mountain range, because the white dragon needed to be there for the adventure. That was the only time they ever encountered Elminster, and it was Elminster just sort of passing through, and they deliberately avoided interacting with Elminster because he was being mysterious and a dick at the time anyway. Elminster is a character for novels. He's a character for introducing lore and stuff in the game. He's a character that you may possibly encounter if you're in the Dales. But other than that, he is completely unimportant. It's like saying I don't like Forgotten Realms because of the god Mystra, or I don't like Forgotten Realms because of Fae being weird and having apricots. It's like you can quite easily just say, oh, Elminster is just this mysterious figure. How does that factor into your tabletop experience, honestly? Dallas, they tried to wow up Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, that's true, and it resulted in a split in the hobby that resulted in the primacy of the brief short-term primacy of Pathfinder. But Pathfinder has sort of thrived in the shadows of Dungeons and Dragons, and now that 5th edition is back, I can't see that Pathfinder is ever going to reattain any sort of market share. I mean, we've seen Pathfinder 2 now, and it's okay. It's all right. What I'm saying is that 5th edition wouldn't be the way it is now if we didn't have 4th edition in between 3.5 and now. It just wouldn't have gone in that direction. Because there wouldn't have been that fall from grace that D&D went through, and that need to re-examine the very basic fundamentals of what makes Dungeons and Dragons. Like, what is fundamentally important on the game table, what actually works in D&D, and what have we just been including in here because we've had it in previous editions and nobody's ever looked at it and gone, do we really need to worry about encumbrance? Does anybody? Do we really need to base everything on alignment? Like, does it need to, I mean, do we need to have spells and stuff that, like, alignment is a requirement of it? Do we need spells which change your gender and your alignment and stuff when really there's other stuff which can do it anyway? We don't need to be specific about that. So, that's the way it went. Oh yeah, Morton Kanan is not a hero. For sure. Elminster is Ed Greenwood in the Forgotten Realms. Yeah. It has been said. AJ, who is your favourite Forgotten Realms character and why is it Jarlaxle? Who's my favourite character in the Forgotten Realms? Dragonbait, probably. Stranger in a Strange Land. It's not understood. Literally not understood. I literally like Dragonbait quite a bit. Trying to express yourself in smells. It's fantastic. I like Dragonbait because he's not a Dragonborn. He's a Saurian. So he's like a dinosaur-based creature. And he literally has trouble communicating with other people because he has to express himself in smells. So he's quite alien, like really. But he's got a heart of gold. He's a paladin. He's a noble being. So he just means the best. The Harples are a really interesting family. I would love to see a supplement on their estate and the people who live there and the experiments and all the stuff going on in the rooms and stuff and their family in general and what's happened to them in the last 100 years. Because we've missed a lot. That's the thing. Time marches on in the Forgotten Realms. There's a lot of people who are like, I don't like this, or I'm never going to go past this point. It's like, well, okay, fine. Then stop there and stop commenting on stuff which is happening now in the Forgotten Realms. It's a living campaign world. What happens at your table and what you do with it is fine. All of this pre-existing adventures and things like that, if you want to stop at that point and just run the Forgotten Realms right then and there in that point in history, fine. Nobody's stopping you. But then to turn around and say that the next edition that gets brought out in 5th edition, or the next supplement that comes out in 5th edition is ruining your game, it's like, bollocks. Give us a break. If you want to run 1st edition D&D, it's fine. Nobody's stopping you. But that doesn't make you doesn't give you a legitimate opinion on the current standard edition of the game or what's happening in the game lore. And there's no reason why that the people who are making the game lore now for Faerun need to worry too much about that opinion either. The Harples are awesome. Well, see, Big B is a Greyhawk guy. William, are they just in R.A. Salvatore's books, or are they... Because we haven't had any books... Are they in a book that is set within the last 100 years of events going on of the current timeline, of like 1493? That's my challenge for you. When is the last... What's the year of the last mention of the Harples in the novel literature? Favourite player race and why is it Kobold? No, I wouldn't say Kobold. My favourite player race is either... I am quite fond of gnomes, I've got to say. I played a lot of gnomes. But also human, because I understand humans. I understand what makes humans tick. I would have to say my trope of characters that I quite often play is skill-based characters, so intelligent characters. I like playing intelligent characters. Because I find it hard to enjoy playing a stupid person in D&D. I can, on occasion. But, yeah, it's a lot easier for me to avoid metagaming if I'm playing a smart character. You know? The Sundering, damn. Oh, if there's any comments that are being held up and not appearing in the chat, it's because of the profanity. Sorry. I have profanity settings on. Yes, I have to read the Sundering ones. You've never had a single player play a gnome? Well, that's their option, obviously. Shit, really? There's a Christian Minecraft server. How do I understand humans so well? Well, I live amongst them. Believe it or not. Angry kobold noises. So, I've got no problem with technology in Dungeons & Dragons because technology is just spells made manifest. Really. We have all the existing game stats for technology existing in the game right now. What is a jump drive on a starship if not like a gate spell? A dimension door spell or something like that. Or not dimension door. Planar gate. Small for life. You haven't seen the Swole Bold, have you? The kobold that can pick you up and snap your spine. Those guys are scary. Science, fantasy, exactly. The reptilian Illuminati. I find that fascinating. Like, there's no evidence of it whatsoever. Do people truly believe that? Do people truly believe that there's reptilian aliens wearing human skin costumes walking around the Earth right now? Because I've got to say, car crashes and stuff happen. You ever seen a reptilian alien in a car crash? No? House fire? Yeah, Swole are cool. What's your favourite monster from the Kobold Press monster books? Well, I just mentioned the Swole as being pretty cool. There's all sorts in there. I don't like to play favourites with monsters. Justin Bell Mora, that is an excellent question. Something I've been thinking of for a while. Being from New Zealand and understanding Maori culture and how they feel about their cultural identity being used by other people around the world, like people copying tamoko and using their words and their religion and things like that, their folklore, in games and popular. Like, one of the things I saw was like action figures. Like, what were they called? Beast Wars or something like that, where they were clearly taking Polynesian culture out of context and they were just applying it, like the words of things to these things. Like Mistara, for instance, grabs a bit of Maori folklore, a Maori culture, you could say, and wedges it into the Mistara setting, for instance. And as somebody from New Zealand, it is pure cringe, because you know what the average reaction of the Maori people would be in New Zealand to that, and they don't like it. They don't like it at all. Essentially, I can see where they're coming from. That is their cultural identity, and it's their tourism dollars. It's what they teach their children. It's their personal identity for their ancestry and their heritage, and to see it represented as like stupid cartoony figures in games and stuff is icky and horrible. It's a horrible feeling. Like, for instance, I've got Scandinavian heritage, and every time I see a Christmas tree indoors stuck in this dying tree in somebody's house, a fake Christmas tree, for instance, and you're like, the Yuletide tradition has been very firmly appropriated by religion and spread around the world. Fine and good, but yeah, it's uncomfortable. Father Christmas and stuff like that. People saying that Father Christmas was invented by Coca-Cola. So really? Yeah, he didn't come through a chimney, a brick chimney. He came through the hole in a yurt. And what was he bringing? Magic mushrooms. That's what he was bringing in his sack of things, not kiddies' toys. Well, there was kids' toys as well, but all the parents would be tripping out on fly agaric. Thank you very much. Anyway. Yeah, it's cringe. So, yeah, that's the general reaction to people with, of the Maori culture, seeing people using Maori stuff in games and things like that. It's cringe-worthy. It's like, you're not paying the proper respect to it. And that's the thing. Like, that's why you don't see Christian religion represented in Dungeons and Dragons, because it's not folklore to Christians. You can use Greek stuff, ancient Roman culture, ancient Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and things like that. That's fine, because nobody's really objecting to that these days. It's not a living religion or a living culture. But you've got to pay respect to the people who are living that as their personal identity, and you don't want to lampoon that in a fantasy setting without their say-so, sort of thing. That's the whole point. It's respect. It's a matter of, just general respect for living people. What's a good example? So, I was watching a live stream the other day, and you'll have to. You'll forgive me, guys. I don't remember the name of it, but you'll see me following them on Twitter and stuff like that. And it was really good. The DM, the ironing board DM is his nickname. So if you know what I'm talking about, shout out to you guys. It was really good DMing. I just went in and sort of started watching on a brief moment where I actually had an opportunity to watch a Twitch stream for a change. And he was right in the midst of this culmination of this storyline where the characters were making a big decision, and a big NPC that was really important to all of them was having a big transition thing. And it was really important and quite cool. One of the people playing at the table, this guy, I honestly thought he was Kiwi, because he was speaking with a perfect, near perfect New Zealand accent. And I was just like, occasional bits he would kind of sound South African, and occasional bits he'd sound more Australian. I was just like, is that a Kiwi? And then he started talking out of character, and he was American or Canadian, not entirely sure. I think American. And I was just like, wow. So his character was a Goliath that was speaking with a Kiwi accent, and had a sort of a Maori vibe going on. He was even wearing a Kiwi shirt. That was cool. So that's somebody who was not appropriating culture. They were paying respect to a culture, which I thought was perfectly fine and appropriate. So yeah, tick of approval. Even though I myself am not Maori, I feel a sense of a kindred and identity with them as people who share my country. Thanks, Tony. Oh, V, yeah. Oh, that's right. I asked you guys, about the alien thing. Yeah, right. Does the Quran mention genies? Jinn? Surely it must. I haven't actually read the Quran. I've read the Bible. I've actually done quite a lot of comparative, the pre-existing religions before Christianity came about, and what was the origin of Christianity and what religions existed in that area at the time, and the exact origin of Christianity and why it turned from the transition from polytheism in that area to monotheism is very interesting. And I think anybody who calls themselves a Christian, it behooves you to read that and learn about the prehistory of that area. Because otherwise you'll run into somebody like me who's read all of that and knows the historical precedent and why it came about, and its political reasoning. Do you think that prestige classes will return in 5th edition? No, not at this stage. There are sermons about the jinn performed by clerics of Islam on YouTube. Oh, really? I might check those out. So that's the thing. I am actually quite interested in religion, particularly religious history, because it's cultural history and it's political history. Quite often, people who are interested in Dungeons and Dragons are history buffs as well. Kind of goes part and parcel, really. Always has. Yeah, Lamazu, Sphinxes, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep. used to describe any supernatural creature? All right. Oh, the Runecrafter. Yeah. Yeah, so, you all know my attitude towards religion in general is I don't think that should be the like, I've got no problem with people having faith or believing in an outer power of some kind. It's just religions are political entities, they're historical entities, they're controlling entities, they're politics of the ancient world. And they change and they chop up and they morph into other things. And if you track back and do your actual reading and research and track back through the history of the world, you'll see exactly what the origins of these different religions are. And that, they're like editions of Dungeons and Dragons, honestly. Every now and then there's a new edition. Does that make the old editions completely invalid? No, there's people who can still go back and play them. It's like, well, Judaism was around, and then then the new edition came out, which was Christianity. But a lot of people weren't happy with that, and so there's the Pathfinder of religion, which is Islam, popped up. The allegory is kind of scary. Saruk video, yes, please. Thanks, Gadzooks. I'm actually going to put that down on my little. Oh, I've done Pazuzu, that's crossed off. Done the Nether Scrolls. What else have we got here? Book of Vile Darkness, the Moss Wasp, Muriel the Misshapen, Avandra, the Bandaloth, the Barghest, the Electrum Dragon, the Dragon, and the Dungeon. Me having fun. So, the Saruk, which I can never spell correctly. So yes, I'm always going to run into flack with my whatever I say about religion, as opposed to faith. I do see the two things as separate entities. I will always run into problems with it in comment sections and stuff, and I'll get trolled and whatever. And people will assign me to being this or that or whatever. They'll pigeonhole me. I have told people what I am and what I believe. So yeah, I don't care. My beliefs are just as valid as yours, whether they're in a book or not. Grey Render, yep. What does that make Mormonism in 4th edition? Starfinder. Yeah, demons sounds more like it. Do you think the Wizards of the Coast will do another Crossworlds campaign in 5th edition? I don't know if they'll do an official book resource for that. What are you? Check under my hood. So the closest, well, what I would identify with is not agnostic or atheist or religious. It would be a pantheist. So an apantheist is a person that acknowledges that signs point to there being a higher dimensional form of intelligence, but that makes no difference to my life or the way that I do things. So I'm a good person because I believe in being a good person. I don't think anything is watching me do things. I don't think there's anything watching over me. Even if it exists, It doesn't care about me. That's what I believe. So I'm not interested whether God exists or not. It doesn't matter to me. So anybody who gets into a big argument about proof or not, it's like it's just not going to work. I just don't care. What I care about is how you treat other people, how you function as a human being, what human beings do in general as a cohesive unit in society. It's based largely on biology. Like the greatest miracle on the earth right now is the fact that multicellular organisms exist. Do you know how bizarre that is? Like if you take it as put it as a metaphor or an allegory or something like that, whatever word applies. A person one day links arms with another person and another person and another person and another person, and all of a sudden you've got a big group of 100 people who are walking around. The people in the middle of that group can't see anything going on around them. All they know is the people around them in their immediate vicinity, and they're totally reliant on doing their job, which is I don't know, whatever function they play in that new organism, but they give up their identity as an individual. And this is what a multicellular organism does. Like a cell in my little finger is still an individual, right? It's got its own, it's enclosed space. It's got its own microcellular life going on. It's not only that, but it's also got mitochondria, which live inside the cell as a eukaryote, and they are individuals with their own DNA or RNA, and they've totally integrated into this the subcell. So it's these layers of individuals who have given up their individuality to become part of the larger whole. And who's to say, like they're not cognizant of what's going on. They're not sapient, but they're part of a larger entity that they have no awareness of. And we are part of an entity that we have no awareness of because it exists in higher dimensional states. There's 11 dimensions in our multiverse. So if life exists in these 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions, does it carry on up? And as you go up in dimensions, that just means things get more and more integrated. Dimensions allow things to fit into each other. So if you follow the reasoning of physics and biology, signs point to there being higher entities that we're a part of. It's hinted at in religions when they talk about the Holy Ghost, for instance, moving amongst the population of the faithful, etc. Faith healing, channeling the ability of the higher power through things. In Star Wars, it's the Force that moves through everything. In biology, there seems to be evidence that there is a connecting principle between things. So if a certain number of animals learn a new technique of something overnight, once it hits a certain point, a threshold, all of them learn how to do this. And it's something that science just can't explain using traditional methods. The best example of that was monkeys washing potatoes. There was a group of monkeys who learned how to wash dirt off potatoes in hot springs, and then all of a sudden all of them across the entire chain of islands were doing it with no possible communication between them other than some mysterious psychic field. And the other example was birds, blue tits, learning how to peck through the foil covers, the foil caps on milk bottles to get at the cream inside. A certain group, because England has got one of the best observed natural environments in the world. So a certain group of them in a specific region were observed learning how to do this. And then almost overnight, boom, across the entirety of Europe, all of them were doing it. The world is interesting enough without inventing stuff. So, yeah. There you go. The 100th monkey phenomenon. Yes, exactly, Matt. So, I'm far more open to this sort of stuff, but my primary focus is on the truth. I'm interested in the truth and evidence and the observation of weird facts and figures and things, stuff going on in the world, that sort of stuff. Who was it? Hawkins was saying, you ask a religious person, where did the universe came from? They said, oh well, God created it. And then you haven't answered the question. You've just deferred it to who made God. So the question hasn't been answered. You haven't revealed the truth. So where did God come from? Well, God's always been there. Well, so is the universe. Anyway, back to Dungeons and Dragons. Well, the Brits, Gadzooks, have got a very interesting history. So the cultural thing at the time was that the nobility, or the sons and daughters of nobility, particularly the sons, or not even like the second-born sons and stuff of nobles and stuff, would go to religious institutions to learn. And essentially what you ended up with is, in the backwoods of the rural lands of England, you put these highly educated nobles who had joined the priesthood and stuck them in a church somewhere, tending to a bunch of largely uneducated people, highly educated in the form of their trades and things like that. Don't get me wrong, there wasn't any stupid peasants. Well, there probably was stupid peasants, but masons and things like that were highly paid, world-travelling people to a far greater extent than we previously thought. Like, for instance, somebody would have made their way around the world making castles and things back in the day. But what they ended up doing was they wanted to carry on their education. They wanted to contribute to academia. But because of the institution they were involved with, there were certain restrictions on what sort of sciences they could follow. But the church essentially said, look, there's nothing wrong with studying the natural world, because the natural world is God's creation. So it's a pious thing to do, to observe nature and formulate theories about what's God's thinking. What did he do? What sort of system did he make? So study it to your heart's content. So England has got one of the best natural histories in the world because of all the fantastic observations. Like, a lot of modern genetics, for instance, is based on monks planting peas and things like that, and observing, crossbreeding and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's great. Without, the religious sort of thing, that wouldn't have been such a huge focus. Yeah, that's true. The stupid peasant was a dead peasant, yeah. Ah, Chris, yeah. So, where's it? I think it was Robert Heinlein, Hellstrom's Hive, where humans became more hive-like by choice. It was a really interesting book. Oh, yeah. The Taniwha, yeah. Yeah, Mendel. Where? Yeah. Modern genetics, but not genomics. Kanji squares. No one did peas. Yeah. Well, I mean, it often comes down to personalities, doesn't it? People who are in charge of these things. Cults. Methuselah's children. Ah, it's been a very long time. I think I was read that when I was like 13. I don't even know if I read the entire thing. Bleh. Boy, Heinlein's work was quite a long time ago now, wasn't it? 1950s, 1960s. A lot of that pulp sci-fi stuff is really dated now. I haven't actually seen the Kids on Bikes RPG yet. I'd be interested. Nobody sends me any free RPGs. I don't do enough reviews, obviously. Wonder what the D&D level of medical tech is at, AJ. Well, the first thing is the ecology, the natural world of Dungeons and Dragons, particularly somewhere like Faerun, for instance. You've got a lot more sort of mystical, magical plants and things, and the biomes are very specific and locked up. So you've got the broad sort of like, here's more sort of deserts and hot areas, and here's the cold areas and stuff. But across the Forgotten Realms, it's more like North America in some ways, in the climate and stuff. So the Sword Coast is like California, I suppose, but it's much more shifted towards Canada. So Waterdeep would be up around where Canada is. Down towards Arm and Tether is California. That's the climate area. Kalimshan is you're starting to get into Mexico, and then the jungles of Chult are South America. You know, tropical jungle and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So you've got that whole, and that's all connected by land, so you don't have to worry about taking spices and herbs and stuff from one country across a big body of water from one to the other. Not only that, but you've got the Sea of Fallen Stars is this major connector that allows free trade of all these very dispersed climate zones and different environments and things with different plants and medicines and stuff like that. So Mulholland and Unther have got like their own cultural heritage that stems from the Mascari Empire. The Plains of Purple Dust is where that was around. And that borders right up against the far and mysterious east. So Karatura and stuff like that, and the Sho Empire and all that is a very active and massive, way more populated and advanced place than the Forgotten Realms area, the Faerun area. The Sword Coast is relatively new and fresh. Arm has got a previous history of expansion, so that's basically like Spain. Yeah, and that's the origin. Arm and Tether and Cormyr is the heart of the common language, for instance, and that sort of civilization that's spread out from there. So Cormyr used to be the sort of the central heart of the Forgotten Realms, where all the adventures and stuff would start and then spread out from there. Now it's much more shifted towards the Sword Coast. I'd love to see more adventures and stuff based on Lurin and Dambrath and Halrua and the Shah and that sort of stuff. Like the far coast is interesting, but we don't really see anything about that. The Eastern Shah and yeah. Or the Lake of Steam and the Shining Sea, Lantern. Like Lantern and the Moonshade Isles, they're massively important. And they're more towards Arm and Tether and Kalimshan. So yeah, it's interesting. I should actually do a video where I just go through all the different regions for people who are not familiar with what the hell I'm talking about. Just go through bit by bit and say, okay, this is this, and this is the people who live there. Would that be interesting to you? I think so. Sriracha hot sauce. I actually got some mayonnaise with sriracha. I didn't read the label. It was sriracha mayonnaise. I was like, who would do this? Burn my face off. Oh, somebody was talking about a Mind Flayer as a playable race. Would that be too powerful? No. I think it'd be quite perfectly fine to make a Mind Flayer character race. Of course, the interesting thing about Mind Flayers is that some of them are paranoid about their host body. There's one particular famous Mind Flayer underneath Waterdeep 100 years ago, who was his Xenomorph was not perfect, and his parasite slug actually had to really fight to convert the host body. And so when he became a full-fledged mind flayer, I say he, it was they. When they became a full-fledged mind flayer, they had a pathological hatred to conquer the creature type that he was, or they were based on. So it can result in some interesting mental quirks. Oh, horseradish mayo is really nice. Yeah. Aioli with horseradish is so good. Anyway, it's time for me to go, everybody. I've been here like almost an hour and 40 minutes anyway. But I thought it'd be good to catch a few early birds. Yeah, geography is important. A lot of people are tired of the Forgotten Realms because they're tired of a specific area. There are far more areas of the Forgotten Realms to explore. And each of them has an entirely different feel. Yeah, if you're in Germany and you're not eating your potato chips with mayonnaise, there's something wrong with you. And if you're in England, have some vinegar on your chips. Or if you're in New Zealand, tomato sauce, obviously. Or if you're in the States, ketchup. Oh, flames on miniatures. So start off, the closer you are to the heat source, where the flames is coming from, the brighter it is. So it goes white at the hottest bit, and then it goes to yellow, graduating to orange, and then red at the very tip. That is how you do it. Blend. Mystara, yeah. Maybe. Sorry, Emin. I'll be here around the same time next week, Emin, if you're tuning in this time. This would normally be close to halfway through the stream, but I started an hour earlier today. Yeah, setting creation does take a lot of work. All right. That's me. Thanks for the chat. I hope I answered a lot of the questions at the start of the stream about the Dark Alliance game and my involvement in it and what I know and don't know about the gameplay and things like that. But yeah, I do definitely encourage you to wait for a gameplay trailer. I know the cinematic trailer was not to everybody's taste, for sure, and they were very vocal in telling everybody about it. But yeah, it is a good game, and it does have a heart of gold behind it, which is me. I'm very dedicated to the lore, obviously, and yeah, I gave it my best shot. Whether they use all that stuff I gave them or not remains to be seen. I'm as curious about it as you are. Okay, bye everybody.